Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I'd really appreciate your comment. It helps me understand if you enjoyed the story and how I can improve in future ones. She set the ring beside the cutting board, between a lemon wedge and the dull paring knife. Friday night, late enough that the streetlights were already painting the snow melt on our sidewalk a sickly orange. I was rinsing a skillet, letting the water run until the bacon grease gave up. My name is Aaron Blake. I'm 36, an operations manager for a logistics company in St. Louis. She said it softly, temporary, just until she figured things out, and it landed heavier than any slammed door. The word made its own weather in the room. Steam from the sink curled toward the ceiling, the dishwasher clicked awake, some neighbor's bass thumped through a wall. Everything ordinary kept moving, and I stood there with my hands under the water, letting the heat sting until the pan cleared and there was nothing left to scrub. I didn't say much. I dried my hands, turned the skillet upside down on the rack, and nodded once. She looked relieved. Temporary, she repeated, tracing the faint tan line her ring had left as if to prove permanence still existed underneath. If I'm honest, this didn't begin with a ring on a counter. 3 weeks earlier I noticed her good coat was coming out on Tuesday nights. Wednesdays, too. It wasn't about the coat itself. It was the way she slid her phone face down on the table when I walked in, the new password she claimed she'd always had, the heatless hugs where my hands landed on fabric, not a person. She had new phrases. Self-work, finding my voice, the way people say we when they mean I. The ring was off on some nights already, replaced by the stacking of bracelets she said felt less heavy. Arguments got small and sharp. The spoon I used to stir the sauce. The playlist I put on that had too many throwbacks. She'd roll her eyes at the groceries I picked, ask why I bought the expensive tomatoes, and then forget them until they softened into the sink. If I asked about Friday plans, she'd say she didn't want to be managed. The word managed used to be a compliment around here. She started saying freedom. I kept my side steady. I got up at 5, hit the gym on South Broadway when the city is mostly trucks and tired men. I made my oatmeal, grabbed my thermos, and drove the same stretch of I-55 to an office where everyone knows I'm the guy you hand your problem to when you need it smaller. On my lunch breaks, I stopped scrolling headlines and started looking at leases out of pure curiosity. That's what I told myself. Curiosity. I changed the emergency contact on my HR portal from her name to my brother's. Quiet, practical moves are a habit with me. I've always done my own oil changes. The week before the ring hit the counter, she came home with a bright laugh I didn't recognize. It stayed on her face even when she set her bag down. She walked past me humming, poured herself wine, and asked if I'd mind if she tried something different this month, something like a soft separation, but not really. I asked what different meant, and she said she hadn't defined it yet, but she'd know when she felt it. That's when I realized we were negotiating feelings with a moving tape measure. Friday's dinner was nothing special: pan-seared chicken, asparagus, rice with the garlic she claims I overuse. We ate mostly in silence except for her phone, which lit up like an opening night. She laughed at something and then swallowed the laugh when she saw me watching. I started dishes. The ring made a dry, honest sound against the counter that cut through the dishwasher's churn, and then she said it. Temporary. A test to get clarity. She needed to know who she was without roles. She needed to make decisions without the weight of a circle of gold telling her what those decisions should be. I could have said 100 things. That marriage isn't a pilot program. That the word temporary belongs to storage units and parking meters, not vows. That I am not the one who keeps score, but I do know how to close a spreadsheet. Instead, I gave her the calm I've given 100 drivers on I-70 in ice storms. Okay, I said. If temporary helps you think, take it. She kept talking in careful phrases. Reframing. Space. The kind of vocabulary that tries to dull the edge of the knife. I watched her fingers without the ring. You learn a lot from hands. Those fingers moved freer, almost theatrical, as if she could paint air now. I looked at the lemon, the knife, the clean skillet, and at the faint ring-shaped mark on the counter where condensation had made a perfect circle earlier. I had wiped it away out of habit, even then. After dinner, I took the trash out. The air had that thin late winter bite. The alley smelled like oil and last week's decisions. On the way back in, I checked the small metal box in the hall closet where I keep our passports and the title to the truck. It was all still there, just presence, proof that not everything had turned into vapor. I stood there a long moment with my hand on the cool lid and thought about how often I'd reached for this box in storms. Once during a tornado warning, once when my dad's heart went bad and we had to fly. It has weight. It reminds you that the right kind of preparation is love you do in advance. She took the guest room to journal. I wiped the stove even though it didn't need it. After the steam cleared, the kitchen smelled like lemon and clean metal. I gathered the mail from the credenza, thumbed past a credit card offer with her name on it, the kind that promises a bonus if you spend enough on things that don't last. I set it aside without thinking. Old habits. When she came back down without the ring, I saw the tan line properly for the first time. Pale skin where something had lived for years. She looked at me like I was supposed to fill the silence with protest. Across town, a freight yard was probably loading double-stacked containers under floodlights, steel groaning and engines coughing. I pictured that, the whole choreography, and felt steadier. Here's the truth I kept to myself. I'd felt the ground tilt months ago in small degrees, the way she laughed at her phone more than at me, how she began to use we to describe nights with friends and I to describe our home, the way she called my job safe. You don't fix tilt by yelling at the floor. You brace, you level, you choose where the weight goes next. She kissed my cheek like people do at airports and said she was going to meet a friend for tea. No ring. No plan beyond the glow of a screen calling her somewhere interesting. I watched her leave with her shoulders lighter. The door clicked with the gentlest little finality. I washed the last glass. I dried the counter where the ring had been, until not even the shape of the idea remained. Temporary. I let the word sit next to me on the couch. Then I pictured a calendar and pushed my finger down on the current square until it darkened. A date is just a box you agree to live inside for a day. You can climb out. My eyes went to the bookcase where we keep a row of framed photos. The courthouse steps, the first apartment with the crooked blinds, the Smokies hike where it rained and we laughed because nothing we wore was waterproof. I felt something unclench. If she could loosen her commitment like a bracelet. I powered down the living room lights and let the house go quiet. In the dark, that kitchen counter felt like a ledger line. Above it, a line of cabinets we picked together. Below it, a trash bin that doesn't care what you throw away if you do it neatly. I set my phone on the table, opened a blank note, and typed 3 words I've used 100 times at work. Action items, Monday. I didn't list them yet. The decision had already been made in the sound a ring makes when it stops belonging where it was. Saturday came with a clean sky and a mess of little signals. She put on that black sweater that only comes out when she wants to be seen, dabbed perfume at her throat, and swept her hair into a careless knot that probably took 20 minutes. The ring dish on her dresser held exactly one thing, the idea of us, in metal. She glanced at it, not long enough to feel anything. Brunch with the girls, she said, not asking if I had plans. I told her I'd be in the garage, tightening the belt on the mower. It's February. The lawn won't need cutting for weeks. She nodded like I'd given a password. She posted a boomerang from a patio on Cherokee Street. Mimosas clinking, sleeves pushed back, bracelets singing when they hit the glass. No ring. Comments from friends stacked under it. Love this energy. Find yourself. Proud of you. I scrolled once and closed the app. It wasn't anger I felt. It was something cooler, almost clinical, like checking a bill of lading for accuracy and finding the counts off by 2. You don't yell at the pallet. You correct the order. Her returns got later. Monday, she said the meeting ran long. Tuesday, Pilates. Wednesday, just tea. Said the way a teenager says, just friends. She drifted around me like a guest. Opened our fridge, used our spices, but moved her toiletries to the guest bath for better light. She left receipts on the counter for dresses I'd never seen her wear at home. On Thursday, she showered and stepped out in a dress that belonged to weekends. I asked the only question I let myself ask. Is there someone else? She didn't even look offended. That's an insecure question, she said, buckling a shoe. I didn't repeat it. When she left, I opened my laptop and did what I'm good at. I made a list that didn't accuse anyone of anything. It was a map of my own house, subscriptions in both names, autopays, the storage unit where we keep winter tires, the spare keys I've loaned to neighbors and never retrieved. Nothing dramatic, just columns. That's how you move freight without dropping it. You label what things are before you move them at all. At night, she tried little experiments. She'd angle her phone toward me, so a man's name sat at the top of the screen longer than casual. She'd mention a new trainer, a creative director, a guy who really listens to women at work, and then glance at me to measure distance. I watched the way a foreman watches a yard in rain, aware, not rattled. She wanted a scene. I gave her a schedule. I'm up at 5, I'd say. If you're out late, text me so I can set the alarm. It drove her crazy that I refused to audition for the jealous husband. Her friends came through the house like a small weather system. One night, I came home to laughter in the kitchen and a circle of wine glasses. They looked me up and down like a committee reviewing a proposal. Someone asked how work was. Steady, I said, which is the truth and the threat. The one with the sharp bob said, she's exploring who she is outside of roles. I said, me too, and put my gym bag in the hall closet. They exchanged looks as if I'd misunderstood the assignment. I changed small things, then smaller ones. My coffee beans moved to a canister on a high shelf. My laundry basket came into the garage, next to the tool bench, which meant my shirts no longer went missing into her piles. I turned off the family, location sharing we'd both ignored for years. I didn't announce it. I called the locksmith to rekey the back door because the lock sometimes stuck. I took the spare from the fake rock on the porch and put it in the metal box with the passports. I set my own expectations where I could reach them. On Sunday, her mother texted her about a family dinner next week. I heard the chime, heard the sigh, saw the conflict in her mouth. Family notices what social media glamorizes. We don't have to go, I said, and I meant it. She said, too fast. No, we should. She wanted to control the reveal. I nodded and penciled it into the calendar on the fridge. She had no idea a pencil can press as hard as ink when you know the pressure points. She started talking in mission statements. I still love you, she said one night, folding towels she never puts away. I just need to redefine myself. Love used to sound like a verb here. Now it sounded like a plaque. I asked what redefining looked like day to day. She said she couldn't explain it, that she'd know when she felt it, which meant I would know when she wanted me to see it. I said okay, and the okay tasted like steel. Every okay was a measured inch of rope I wasn't tangled in. At work, I said yes to a week of night shift audits nobody wants. Freight doesn't care if your marriage is performing sobriety tests. It wants to be moved. The warehouse at 2 a.m. is pure. Forklifts whispering, the air that sharp cardboard smell, guys who speak in nods and numbers. Something about guiding 100,000 pounds of product out of a problem and into a plan steadies a man. I drove home at sunrise to a house that felt like a staged rental. She was asleep in the guest room with a satin mask on. I showered, packed my gym bag, and put my wallet and keys in a tray by the door I'd started using only for my things. Midweek, she left the ring dish empty and put on a stack of thin gold bands that chimed when she texted. She took a full-length mirror selfie before leaving and then asked, "Do I look different?" I said, "You look prepared." She wanted a compliment that told her she was still the sun here. I gave her a weather report. A couple of times she tried to manufacture intimacy without the ring, as if not wearing it made affection a concession. She'd touch my sleeve in the hallway and watch me, hunting for hunger in my face. On Friday, I found a flyer in our mailbox from a storage company offering a month free. The universe has a sense of humor, it doesn't laugh it out loud. I slid the flyer into the metal box with the passports and wrote the company name on my list, not starred, just present. That night, she told me she might spend the weekend at a friend's loft to see how living alone feels. I told her I'd be on nights again and to text if she needed me to secure the alarm. She hesitated at the door like a person leaving their dog with a neighbor. The alarm beeped when she opened the door and again when it closed. And then the house was quiet enough to hear my own plan forming. If escalation is a sound, it's not shouting. It's ice thickening on a lake in February. You think you can still skim a stone across it until the stone stops dead. She kept pressing for a fight that would prove I cared by hating what she wanted. I let her want it. She mistook my steadiness for a pause. It was a ramp. I cleaned the kitchen, wiped the counter where her ring had once clicked like a coin. I took an envelope from the desk and wrote one word on the front, temporary. Then I slid the empty envelope back into the drawer. No note inside. I'm a logistics man. You gather the straps. You check the weight. Calm is a tool if you know where to aim it. I didn't argue with midnight mimosas or captioned freedom. I mirrored her language back and built it into a system. If temporary was the policy, I'd implement it like a policy. Clear scope, clear budget, clear end date. Monday, 7:10 a.m., Bank app opened before coffee. I moved my direct deposit to the personal account I'd opened years ago and never used. I left a cushion in the joint checking for autopays I'd committed to, mortgage, water, trash, because I keep my word. I removed an authorized user from 2 credit cards with a tap and a short call. The rep asked if I wanted to close the joint account. No, it stays open for bills, not convenience. The difference matters. By lunch, I'd ended every shared subscription that translated my money into her entertainment. The emails stacked up like tiny door closings. Netflix, Spotify, fashion rental, meal kits. I kept the utilities on. Light and heat are not points in a game. I pushed my phone bill through a number transfer form so her line could walk wherever she wanted under her own plan. A polite note to the carrier. Please release this number to a personal account at her request. I didn't announce any of it. I printed a 1-page summary for myself, a habit from years of audits. Status, effective date, confirmation numbers, no commentary. The title at the top in 12-point bold, temporary implementation. I slid it into the metal box with the passports, next to the envelope I'd labeled last week. Tuesday, I toured a furnished studio 8 blocks away. Month to month, keyless entry, small balcony overlooking a brick wall that looks good in morning light. The manager asked when I wanted it. I said Friday, 1 month to start, paid in full. She offered to add my wife's name. No, keep it simple. I wrote, temporary housing, on the memo line of the check because I have a petty streak I don't perform in public. Back home, I used the guest room like a crossdock. 2 suitcases, one labeled essentials, the other everyday. I packed exactly what a person needs to live well for 30 days. Neutral clothes, toiletries, running shoes, the second best hairdryer, the coffee grinder she insists is better than mine. No keepsakes or wedding album. Those stay. I laid a printed list on top of the clothes like an inventory sheet. At the bottom, a line I've used in warehouse transfers for a decade. Discrepancies must be reported within 24 hours. Wednesday night, she drifted in at 11. Perfume first, explanation second. The dishwasher hummed like a machine that never stops doing its one job. She checked the kitchen island where she leaves her life. Keys, phone, sunglasses, intention. She pawed at her wallet, then frowned at her phone, then peered at the TV. Did the Netflix log me out? I rinsed a glass. Temporary cost savings, I said, same tone I'd use with a vendor. She laughed like I'd told a weird joke that no one enjoyed. You're really taking this personally. I dried the glass. I'm taking it literally. She tried the card the next afternoon at a boutique. I know because my email lit up with an alert I'd set years ago and never needed. Attempted charge declined. I turned off the alert and kept working. At 6:40 p.m., a message. Did you freeze the card? I typed 6 words and deleted 4 until only 2 remained. Temporary implementation. She left me on read for 20 minutes and then sent a single thumbs up, the saddest modern punctuation. Thursday morning, I slid a small stack onto the kitchen counter where her ring had once clicked like a coin. Studio key on a simple ring, a folded lease, a printed address, a note on top in my handwriting. You asked for space. It's ready when you are. The first month is covered. There's coffee in the cabinet and a new toothbrush in the left drawer. No lecture. Beneath the note, the inventory list and the suitcases by the door, handles up. She stared at it all like a tourist reading a map with her own street circled. You moved my things. I kept my voice low. I prepared your things. The house is still yours. The key opens a door to the space you wanted. She touched the key and then withdrew her hand, as if it had heat. This is dramatic. She didn't take the key. She went upstairs and shut the guest room door like she was trying to trap the plan inside. The silence got louder in the days after. She walked around my changes and bumped into her own. Streaming nights turned into books she didn't read. She started wearing the thin gold bands less and touching her bare finger more. The studio key stayed on the counter, then migrated to her purse, then reappeared on her dresser next to the ring dish like 2 pieces from different board games sharing a square. Sunday, family dinner in the suburbs. I drove us because that's what I do. The backyard smelled like charcoal and a spring that wasn't here yet. Her mother hugged us both and saw everything. Mothers always do. 2 cousins, an uncle, too many chairs at one table. Early in the meal, her aunt paused, eyes on my wife's left hand. New rings. The table quieted just enough for the question to land. She lifted her water glass quickly, Too quickly. She asked for a temporary break from the ring. I said, I'm helping her make that space real. The word real hung there like a picture that doesn't quite sit straight. My wife set her glass down, smiled that tight smile people use for customer service, and started a sentence with actually. I didn't interrupt. I watched the room measure. Her father's eyes went to me, my plate, my hands. Her mother's thumb pressed an invisible crease into a napkin. Her explanation poured out in bullet points she'd practiced. Self-work, clarity, redefining. I let it stand next to mine like two palettes labeled differently. Then her mother asked the question that mattered, the same one I asked in my kitchen with fewer syllables. Is there someone else? My wife laughed, too loud, too fast. Of course not. The table watched the laugh bruise itself against the edge of the table and fall. Driving home, she stared out the window as if the streets had new names. You embarrassed me, she said finally, not quite a whisper. I answered a question. You didn't defend me. I didn't contradict you. We passed the storage place with the banner promising first month free, the sign lit cheap blue against the dark. She didn't see it. At home, she carried the suitcases to the door and stopped like someone at a crosswalk, deciding whether to wait for the light. She set them down. She didn't leave. She slept in the guest room. I set my alarm for the night shift and lay there listening to a house that had been told the truth in public. A twist isn't always a shout. Sometimes it's a mirror turned around. She said temporary to keep me on hold. I handed temporary back with a key and witnesses. The day after the key sat on the counter like a verdict, she woke up early and tried normal. Pancakes. Radio low. No ring. She plated mine with the good syrup. I thanked her, ate, rinsed my dish, and left for the warehouse audit without saying anything that could be mistaken for an invitation back to how it was. Normal isn't a peace treaty when it's theater. By noon she was texting from the boutique again. Card. I let the dots blink and disappear. At 2 she tried a different angle. You've made your point. Can we stop punishing each other? I read it twice. My calm can be mistaken for cruelty by people who only hear loud. I typed slowly. I'm not punishing you. I'm matching the arrangement you asked for. She didn't answer. An hour later, a screenshot landed on my phone from a friend of hers who has never liked me. A photo from our family dinner captured by a cousin. The caption under my wife's bare hand. Fresh start. The comments were a tug of war. Half confetti, half caution. She'd curated her circle well. The internet doesn't do context, it does sides. That night she wore the ring. I noticed when she reached for the salt. It gleamed like a solution. She tilted her hand toward me. I let my eyes land on it and keep moving. A ring you take on and off for effect is a prop. We watched half a movie, and she slid closer on the couch until her leg touched mine. I didn't move away. After 20 minutes, she stood up too quickly, muttered something about needing fresh air, and walked the block in her coat. She came back with the ring in her pocket and an expression bruised by her own test. 2 days later, she tried panic. A text at 11:47 p.m. from the studio. I think someone is outside my door. The camera in the hall saw nothing when the manager checked it, just a delivery guy and a neighbor with a plant. I sent her the building's emergency number and asked her to keep me posted. She called me cold the next morning. I told her the truth. I'm steady. The key moved with her. Purse, dresser, pocket, back to the dish. She spent 2 nights at the studio and then came home without announcing the switch. I found her on the back steps with coffee, eyes swollen from sleep she didn't get. Everyone's making this into something it's not, she said into the steam. Mom called. Kara sent me a podcast about commitment. I feel ganged up on. I sat in the other chair and looked at our yard, brittle and honest. I didn't call them, I said. You did this in daylight. People can see daylight. She swallowed. You could help me tell it better. I shook my head. I'm not your PR. Her friends tried to rehabilitate the story. Brunch pictures shifted from confetti to captions about navigating complexity. 2 of them unfollowed me. 2 sent me polite, cautious texts asking if I was okay. 1, her most level-headed friend, sent 6 words that landed heavier than any speech. I don't agree with her plan. The money piece sharpened everything like a new blade. Without the streaming and the app-delivered conveniences, nights turned into reading she didn't like and silence she couldn't outrun. She called the bank and learned that the joint account still paid for our roof and our water, but not for nice-to-haves. You cut me off, she said, holding the phone like a wound. I adjusted to temporary, I said. You have your own income. It's not about money, she said, which is what people say just before they ask for some. I offered a budget if she wanted to share expenses like roommates until we decided on bigger steps. She stared at me like I'd set a mousetrap where a welcome mat used to be. A small humiliation found her the following week. She tried to buy lingerie on my Amazon login. Some algorithm recognized our address and made a helpful suggestion, and the order bounced when I changed the password. 2 days later, she asked if I'd seen a delivery. I said no and kept scrolling through warehouse camera footage. She figured out the rest in silence. That night, she made a show of deleting the app from her phone in front of me like a person breaking up with a bad habit. The show was for her. At work, I said yes to a site visit in Kansas City. 2 days, quick turnaround. On the drive back, my phone lit up with a string of messages. Are you in town tonight? Can we talk? I'm at the house. It's important. I kept both hands on the wheel and let the messages stack like pallets on the shoulder. When I walked in at dusk, she was sitting at the table with the ring on, a candle lit, 2 plates out. She tried to smile and missed it by a half-inch. I don't like the studio, she said. It feels like a hotel I can't check out of. I nodded. It's month to month. She exhaled, regrouped. I've been thinking. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I needed that to see what I have. I said nothing. She pushed the candle closer to me. Could we just pretend the last few weeks didn't happen? I looked at her hand, at the gold she thought could rewind time. They happened, I said. We can choose what we do next, but we don't get to edit. She felt the floor tilt and reached for blame. You embarrassed me in front of my family. I answered a question. You weaponized temporary. You coined it. Panic came after blame. She cried quietly, which is harder to watch and easier to ignore. She touched my arm, then my wrist, seeking a pulse to match. I set my fork down and let the silence grow a backbone. It did. She looked away first. Word leaks. The aunt who asked about the ring mentioned to a cousin that I'd arranged a place for her to think. A neighbor saw her carrying the suitcases out and back in and told her own husband that we were trying an experiment. The experiment read to everyone else like a verdict quietly serving its sentence. Her social feed softened from sparkles to quotes about accountability that you post for yourself and pretend are for others. The biggest consequence wasn't public. It was private and simple. She couldn't make me flinch anymore. The man she had learned to provoke into reassuring and explaining had become a white wall that wouldn't return a ball. She threw attention, guilt, invitation, anger. The ball dropped at my feet and stayed there. I wasn't unreachable out of spite. I was unreachable because I was already standing in the place beyond reach. The second biggest consequence. She was alone with her own story long enough to hear its thin parts. On a Thursday night, after we ate like roommates again, she said without looking up, "Do you think I'm a bad person?" I rinsed my plate. "I think you made a choice. Choices teach." She nodded, swallowed, pressed a napkin into a square. "I don't like what it taught." I didn't answer. I scheduled a consultation with a lawyer for the following week. The metal box in the closet held our documents and my list under the title I'd chosen the morning the ring hit the counter. Temporary implementation. Funny how titles tell the truth you don't want to read. She tried one more thing. Flowers delivered to my office with a handwritten card that said, "Let's start again." My warehouse guys whistled and clapped, like men do when they sense a romantic plot. I signed for the vase, read the card, and took the flowers to the break room where the night shift could enjoy them. Starting again isn't the same as repairing. It's just moving the break into a new room. Her game wasn't evil. It was childish. When the crowd thinned and the lights stayed too bright, she saw herself against a wall that didn't move. That's when people grow or leave. She hadn't done either. Yet. I went home, wiped the counter where the ring had once made its small, honest sound, and set my alarm. Consequences aren't a punishment. They're a curriculum. She had enrolled herself. I had withdrawn. Finality doesn't arrive with a trumpet. It shows up like a calendar reminder you set for yourself weeks ago and forgot on purpose. Monday morning, 8:30, I sat across from a lawyer with a clean desk and a clearer voice. I handed over the timeline I'd typed the night she put the ring on the counter. No flourishes. Dates, actions, witnesses when there were any. She asked if I was angry. I told her I was organized. We filed for dissolution with a request for exclusive use of the house and a simple, fair division. On the way home, I stopped for boxes, the thick kind that don't collapse when they're asked to hold what they didn't create. I labeled them like I would palettes: closet, essentials, bath, daily, kitchen, personal. No joint history or sentimental landmines. Those stayed where they were born. I didn't toss anything. I packed carefully, the way you handle fragile cargo, because it once meant something, even if it can't be shipped where you're going. I set the boxes in the guest room and taped a sheet to the door. Pick up by Friday, 6 p.m. After that, delivery to studio. After that, donation. Not a threat. A schedule. I slid her studio key into a small envelope and placed it on top of the stack. Beside it, I put the ring in its velvet box and wrote one sentence on an index card. Temporary ended when you made it policy. While the printer was warm, I took care of the paperwork that makes a life run quietly. Emergency contacts updated. Medical proxy moved to my brother. Beneficiaries revised. I removed her access to the security system and created a new master code. I left the old guest code active for 7 days and wrote the end date on the whiteboard by the door. I changed the lock on the back gate because it's stuck and because clarity isn't cruel. It's kind to both parties. She came by that evening, not to the studio but to the house, as if doors, like people, could be persuaded by tone. She stood in the entryway looking from me to the guest room sign, to the boxes, to the small envelope. You're serious. I told her I was done pretending temporary meant trial. We're not there, she said, palms open like she was calming a crowd. Let's slow down. I shook my head. You slowed down. I stopped. She looked past me to the kitchen, to the lemon bowl, to the place on the counter where the ring had once clicked an honest sound. We could try counseling. I let the idea sit between us long enough to be real. Counseling can fix dents, I said. You unbolted the wheels. She reached for the easiest weapon: history. Trips, dinners, hospital waiting rooms. Memories as receipts. I didn't argue with any of it. Love happened here. So did this. She mistook my silence for another opening. So, Friday, she said, tapping the pickup note. Could you help me carry them? I nodded. Respect isn't a negotiation, it's a posture. I can lift a box and still put something down. Thursday night, she texted a photo of her hand with the ring back on, as if gold could notarize an intention. The message under it: can we undo the paperwork? I didn't reply. I put my phone face down and made rice, the kind you have to watch for the last 5 minutes because the difference between finished and burned is a small, quiet line. When the timer went off, the rice was perfect and my phone was dark. Friday at 5:40, she arrived with a friend and a borrowed dolly. She wore a hoodie and sneakers. We carried in silence. At 5:58, the last box went into the friend's hatchback. She lingered in the doorway like a person who'd left a light on in a room that isn't hers anymore. We don't have to be enemies, she said. We aren't, I said. We're two people who stopped being what we said we were. She glanced up at the camera in the corner and then at me. What do I do with this? She held up the envelope with the ring box inside. Whatever aligns with your next story, I said. She waited for a softer sentence. I didn't have one. She left the ring in the envelope and put the envelope in her tote. The next week was a series of small closures that felt cleaner than I expected. I moved my gym bag to the truck and took the long way to work because the river in the morning reminds you that everything that looks still is moving. I canceled a trip we'd planned for April and booked a solo weekend in a cabin 2 hours west where the only itinerary is wood, coffee, and a list you don't have to share. I put my name on the vet's file. The dog has always preferred me anyway. I slept deeper. She tried one last time the way people do when they think language can bend steel. A letter in my mailbox in her neatest handwriting, the script she uses when she wants something stamped. It said I'd turned temporary into a weapon. It said she had been scared and selfish and sorry, in that order. It asked me to meet at the coffee shop where we picked our wedding cake when the biggest problem we had was deciding between buttercream and cream cheese. I set the letter beside my breakfast and ate eggs. I folded it once and slid it into the metal box, not as evidence, just as a record of a moment when 2 honest sentences could have saved 6 paragraphs. My lawyer called with a court date on a Wednesday when the city smelled like rain. I put it on the calendar and didn't tell anyone but my brother. He asked if I wanted company. I said no. We talked about the Cardinals for 4 minutes and hung up. After dinner, I took the spare keys she still had from the fake rock and put them in a real drawer. I deleted her from the alarm app and from the favorites list on my phone. Not to erase, to right size. On the morning of the hearing, she texted, Can we ask for a continuance? I stared at the screen, at the certainty under the question. She still believed in later. Later is the lover of people who are afraid of now. I put the phone in my jacket pocket, picked up the folder with my documents, and locked the door behind me. In the elevator, I could see my reflection. A man who kept the house clean, kept the trucks moving, kept his word to himself. We stood on opposite sides of a beige room that has heard everything. The judge asked the questions judges ask. I answered what was mine to answer. I didn't look left when she sniffed into a tissue. The gavel clicked. Paperwork moved from one stack to another. That's how permanent happens. Paper and a click. We walked out into a hallway where the lighting is too honest for nostalgia. At the curb, she said it. The line these stories always try at the end. Can we slow down? I nodded toward the traffic. We already did, I said. She waited for more. There wasn't any. She put the ring back on in front of me. It didn't change the weather. I wished her well because I am not a villain in my own life. She walked one way. I walked the other. Back home, I opened the metal box and removed the page I titled months ago, Temporary Implementation. I laid it flat, drew a single line through the word temporary, and wrote the word completed. Then I closed the box and slid it where it belongs. I brewed coffee in the quiet, the good kind that smells like morning in a place that isn't waiting for a decision. The house didn't feel bigger. It felt accurate. Respect is not negotiable. She thought my silence was emptiness. She will tell the story the way she needs to live with it. I will live with what I did, which was simply this. I refused to keep standing in a room where the lights were on and the switch was in someone else's pocket.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.